Hello, lovelies. Welcome to Night Free Formula. My name's Freedom. Thank you for joining me. In tonight's episode, I wanted to discuss trauma bonds and give you some examples of trauma bonding. Just because I've noticed lately there's been quite a few people asking for actual examples of trauma bonding so they can actually understand the concept in practical terms. But before I start, as usual, please remember, if you like my videos, to actually like them, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to help me grow the channel, please share the video on as many different social media platforms as you would like. All right, lovelies, I've got some notes, so let's get into it. So trauma bonding. So a bloke called Patrick Carnes developed the term trauma bonding, and he used it to describe, this is the kind of official description. So it's basically to describe a strong emotional attachment that's formed between an abused person and his or her abuser that is formed as a result of a cycle of violence. Now, it doesn't matter if we're talking physical violence or emotional, psychological, spiritual, sexual, financial, any form of violence. And what we know is that narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths, from now on I'm just going to refer them to them as narcissists, we know that they use trauma bonds as part of their narc dark arts. You know, they use a whole lot of different techniques to control their victims, including physical abuse, isolation, verbal degradation, psychological manipulation, and they use trauma bonding. They know what they're doing when they do it. You know, these guys aren't, you know, they might not be the smartest, you know, tool in the shed, but they definitely know what they're doing when it comes to trauma bonding. So let's just before I go into examples of trauma bonding, I'll just quickly say that the way trauma bonds occur is narcissists use intermittent reinforcement. So what that means is they're not always nasty. They're not always abusive. Because if they were always abusive, you just get the hell on out of there. Why the hell would anyone stay with someone if they were always just abusive? Right? So they're not dumb. They figured that out. So they know that occasionally they have to be loving. Occasionally they have to be nice. So they do this thing, and it's called intermittent reinforcement. So occasionally they're loving and occasionally they're nice. But the other thing they do is they don't even do it on a regular basis. You know, they keep you on your toes because, you know, it serves their purpose. They basically want you under control, but they want you pumping out fuel. So if you're nervous, if you don't know what's going on, if you're unsure of yourself, you're probably going to work really hard to try and figure out what's going on. How can I fix things? What can I do to make you love me like you used to? You know, you're probably trying a whole lot of things, and that is one of the ways that they get fuel from you, because you're giving them all that attention, all that power, and they love that. That's what they're all about, is the fuel. So the intermittent reinforcement. So, you know, if abusers were abusive all the time, you know, from the get-go. So when you first met someone, if they just, you know, were physically violent and swore at you and yelled at you, I mean, you wouldn't even go on a second date, would you? So they have to start off being nice. They have to draw you in. They have to, you know, get you on, just like fish on a, you know, a fishing line. They've got to put out the bait. They've got to get you on the hook, and then they've got to reel you in. Once you're actually captive, then they can do whatever they want. But what we've found is that even then, you know, even when they think that they've got you on the hook and, you know, that they've reeled you in, even then they will still do the intermittent reinforcement. So they'll still give you occasional bits of loving, occasional bits of good sex, occasional bit of attention, reward, because they actually know that that will make you give more fuel. So, for example, if they just ignored you all the time, if they were cold, cruel, whatever, you would just shut down. You would just stop, because people can't live like that. They can't live, like being a prisoner in their own home. So, you'd kind of just shut down or you try and escape. But they don't want you to shut down. They want you to still be in love with them, to still be giving them fuel. So occasionally they're going to be nice to you. And the thing with it, as I said, is that you never know. So you don't know whether you're going to get a slap or a kiss. Like, that's the way they want it. They want it so you're literally walking on eggshells and that you are so confused about what's coming next. And they can do this kind of periodic love bombing. So just occasionally. And like I said, they won't even do it regularly or consistently. So it's not like 3 days of being an asshole, 1 day of being nice, or 5 days on, 2 days off. There's no consistency. They want to keep you guessing. They want to change it up. And just because it's fun as well. You got to remember, these guys get a kick out of seeing you upset, out of seeing you confused. They read your face and they love it. They absolutely love all that stuff. All right, so let's get back to the trauma bonds. So some examples of trauma bonding. So before I start, just so you know, on the neurological kind of brain level, so these patterns of behavior are reinforcing the neurological patterns in the brain. So the more you do something, the stronger that particular brain line, or oh God, I've tried to explain this once before and it's really tricky. I think I said it was like a record, with the grooves, with the needle in the record, and over years, with the needle going round, the grooves get deeper. Well, it's the same thing with the brain and the way the synapses of the brain work. So whatever you do, whatever you repeatedly do, consistently do, they will be the stronger patterns in the brain. So here are some really terrible examples of what trauma bonding looks like in the real world. So, for example, let's just say you guys have had a fight. He said some pretty fucked up things because he knows your weaknesses and your pain points. So he deliberately goes for those things. Then afterwards, he says that even though you are neurotic or damaged, whatever your pain points are that he just pushed on, so even though you are those things, he still loves you. So as you can imagine, so he's caused this pain in you, and now he's saying that even though you are the things that he's just called you, that he still loves you. So the brain gets confused between, is that a love? Is that, is he being loving or is he damaging me? The brain gets confused. Cognitive dissonance takes effect, and trauma bonds occur. So another example. So just for example, you're off to go out. It's your birthday. You're going to go celebrate on the town. It's your 30th. It's a rare thing. So off you go. You're dressed up to the nines and you walk out, and the look on his face, and he says, are you going to wear that? And automatically you've done something wrong. You don't know what you've done wrong. But even though you think you look beautiful, you go and change. And then when you come back out, he says, oh, that's better. And then he proceeds to try and want to kiss and cuddle you and says things like, I don't want any other man looking at you. This is all for me. This is you. You belong to me. You're my girl. I don't want anyone looking at you. And, and he's all kissy and wanting to get in your face and making you say things like, oh, yes, I'm your girl. Even though, 5 minutes before he made you feel so ashamed because of the way you looked. Once again, this, the brain, this cognitive dissonance, this confusion, there's hurt, there's pain, there's suffering, and then there's him telling you that it's because he loves you that he is doing that. Once again, that's a trauma bond. All right. Oh, yeah, and the worst thing about that one is you spend the entire night worrying and nervous that someone's going to come and actually try and talk to you. Because heaven forbid another man would actually talk to you. All right, another example of trauma bonding is when he rages at you and abuses you, but then cries and begs you not to leave him. So that causes trauma because, when we see someone crying and begging, that in itself can be quite traumatic. But, he's just raged at you. He's literally stood over and terrorized you. And then he's, changed into this little boy and he's crying and he's pleading. So he's traumatized you and then he wants your love. And so this is how this confusion occurs. You're starting to get it? All right. Another example is when he gives you a black eye and then proceeds to tell you that it's your fault. And then later on, when he sees you with the black eye, he comes over and, obviously you've got a black eye and you look pretty, hideous, horrific. And he tells you it's okay. He still thinks you're beautiful. Even though he was the one that gave you the black eye, but he still thinks you're beautiful. So once again, damage has occurred. Confusion has occurred. Is it love? Like he's showing love. He's saying that he loves me when I'm at my worst, but he's given me this black eye. That's a trauma bond right there. All right, so another one. He beats you up and then terrorizes you, but then he's the one that comes and comforts you afterwards, and he literally scoops you up off the floor where you're curled up in a ball, and he's rocking you backwards and forwards like a child and stroking your hair and shushing you and whispering little, sweet nothings in your ear. Acting like the parent and acting like he's, consoling you and comforting you. But he was the one that caused it. This is how trauma bonds occur. These are the kind of things. And what's happening, like I said, on the neurological level is the brain's giving you this kind of double hit of oxytocin. So when this trauma is happening, you're actually getting this double hit of the love chemical. So that's what's actually bonding you even more to the very person that is creating the trauma in the first place. Which is another reason why you miss them when they go, even though you know that they're no good for you, even though the relationship's not healthy and toxic. When you first separate from them, you actually go through a physical withdrawal because you're so used to having, it's called a peptide addiction. I'll do another video on it because it's quite complex. I mean, this is actually already complex stuff. We're talking about brain chemistry, for God's sake, and its role in addiction. And this is, essentially kind of love addiction, sex addiction. It's addiction. All right. So here's a couple of points where if you're thinking, am I trauma bonded or not? For a lot of us, when we're in relationships with narcissists, we think, that we really love them. But is it actually love or is it just a trauma bond? Here's a couple of things to consider. So if, for example, you know that they lie, cheat, manipulate you, and you still can't leave them, you're probably trauma bonded to them. If you do everything for them, if you are the most loyal person, if you do everything for them, you live your life around them, and you kind of get nothing in return from them, you're probably trauma bonded to them. If you feel addicted to them, this is a big one. We all feel love, but if it feels more than love, if it feels like you can't live without them, that's kind of addiction, and that is probably trauma bonds. Hello. And the last one is if you've forgotten your own self-value, and you've lowered your standards or allowed your standards to be lowered, even though you know that it's all going to end badly, but you still can't let go. So even though you might be someone right now who's watching me and you're reading up stuff, about narcissists, and you know in the back of your mind, you know what you're dealing with, you know that it's going to end badly, and yet you still can't leave. That, my darling, is a trauma bond right there. There are ways to deal with trauma bonds, to break trauma bonds, excuse me, but I will do another video about that another day. Thank you for watching, and get yourself narc free, darlings. Life narc free is so much better. Good night.